I'm so excited that you can join me today. I'm really excited to be interviewing you finally. I know it's been like a year that I've been talking about this and trying to birth this idea of interviewing experts on topics that us women care about, because my goal is to support women, mainly in our 30s and 40s, to align with having it all, having a career, having a fulfilling love life, creating the possibilities for family, and living a life of purpose and abundance. So I think that gaining spiritual insight is something that we all want, does inside of us. That's something that many women really crave for. So I was really excited to have you say yes to being interviewed and share some of your insights, Tracy. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure. So I'm going to start off with introducing you. Tracy Atkinson is a certified hypnotherapist, Vedic astrologer, and coach. She's deeply steeped in both the Vedic and shamanic traditions and lives these traditions every day. It is her mission to help you discover what you are, what your strengths are, what's blocking you, and ultimately how to heal yourself and be free. She uses powerful systems that put you in flow and elegantly align you with who you truly are at soul level, your divine self. From there, it's easy. Wow, that's really, really awesome, Tracy. I wish a lot of astrologers would actually say that, but that really helps clarify to a certain extent what the power of astrology is.
Yeah, that's a combination of astrology and coaching tools and also the hypnosis.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. I'm actually excited to hear about all of those because I agree. It's like this combination of these different tools that help bring an integrated and a holistic approach to serving a client in healing and aligning with their divine self. I love that. So Tracy, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your journey. I was reading a little bit about the epiphany you had with your dad, which was really beautiful. And just your childhood interest in metaphysics and symbolism and whatnot. And also, interestingly, your professional background as a cinematographer, and then going into hypnosis and Vedic astrology. So I'd kind of just love to hear a little bit about your story, your background.
Sure. Well, like you read on the about page of my site, I was very interested in metaphysics and, I guess you could say magic as a child and the mysteries of life. And I guess around the age of 30 or so, I became interested in astrology. At first, I was interested in Western astrology. But even before that, I was interested in, myths and archetypes. And I guess it was around my late 20s that I got into the film business also. Because, the film is also like tapping into sort of other realms, you could say, or creating whole other worlds, which is like similar to metaphysics in a certain way, because it's, metaphysics is about tapping into other realms also. So it's just a different way of doing it. One is more creative and one is more, you could say, spiritual. But anyway, with the astrology, that started, like I said, around the age of 30. Then I was deeply involved in the film business at the time, so it was more of a hobby. And then at a certain point, I started becoming, involved with astrology again, more peripherally. This was probably many years later. And then, like you said, there was an event that took place with my father that pretty much changed the course of my relationship with astrology. Basically, what happened was he was, a pretty severe drinker at that time in his life. And I was having a certain thing going on in my chart, which is Saturn was, the planet Saturn was going over my sun. It was conjuncting my sun at the time. And my sun happens to sit in the 8th house of my chart. The eighth house is the house of death and endings. It is a very, intense house that brings up a lot of fears. And with Saturn going over my sun, and also the other thing about the sun is it does represent the father archetypally. So, and Saturn is an enemy to the sun, and Saturn is a restricting force, and also embodies the energy of loss and, in some cases, illness or death. So it was a very intense transit, and I was very aware of it. And I tried calling my father just to check in on him, and I couldn't reach him. And I, was trying him several times throughout the day, and I, it could have been anything, but my intuition was also telling me that it wasn't just him misplacing his cell phone or something like that. So I called a neighbor, and a neighbor came in to look on him, and sure enough, he had had an accident where he had suddenly stopped drinking and gone into having the DTs, and ended up falling and hitting his head and being rendered immobile. So I guess you could say is a combination of my intuition along with my knowledge of astrology that basically saved my father's life. And because I was seeing the transits, and that was giving me, that warning sign that I had to be careful. And my father was definitely at risk at that time. So he did survive that, and went on to live in like another 6 years. So
That's amazing. What a
yeah.
very empowering story.
So it's after that I just became much more steeped in astrology, and actually at that time I was becoming very I became aware of Vedic astrology. So that was a definite shift, and I just plunged into Vedic astrology completely, and found some great teachers, and just started studying it full time. So that led me to where I am now. I studied, like I said, very intensely I had a few different teachers, and then I didn't never really planned on becoming a professional astrologer. It just happened, and here I am. I've been giving readings now for several years, and it is an amazing art and science, and I can get into more of the particulars of that. So basically, the reason why I switched to Vedic astrology from Western is that Vedic astrology is, it's older. It's said to be about 5,000 years old. And it comes from India, and it has an unbroken lineage. So this knowledge, you can just follow it all the way back, basically to the Vedas, which are the ancient texts of India, which have a lot of the mystical knowledge that comes down to us today. Yoga comes out of the Vedas. Ayurvedic medicine comes out of the Vedas. So does mantra, a meditation. So a Vedic astrology, which is also called Jyotish, which Jyotish means the science of light, is another tool, you could say, that the sages or the rishis of India gave us to help relieve suffering. And it's called the science of light because or the eyes of the Vedas, because it allows us to see into our future, deeply into our past, and understand, where it is we're coming from, what our karma is. You could say our karma is really a snapshot of our psyche. Or you could say that the birth chart is a snapshot of our psyche. It shows how we're wired, and in any given circumstance, how we're likely to react. So that's why an astrologer can tell a lot about a person from just looking at the chart, how the person is, what the psychology is, what the talents are, what the skills are, where the person might get tripped up. Where they have a lot of, where their blocks are. And certainly, where the main patterns of, you could say, difficult karma are. So that in some cases that's around relationships, other times it's around career. or it could just be around even mental health. So, where is that person really going to be putting a lot of energy in their life? What is it they're meant to work on this time around? And then inversely, what the strengths are. So a person may come to me and say, what is it that I'm really supposed to be doing? What's my purpose? How can I best use my time? And so with the chart, I can help somebody with that, seeing what their talents are, what their skills are, and giving them the courage to move in that direction. I mean, it's fairly empowering when somebody who doesn't know you at all can tell you about yourself and what your skills and talents are and what your challenges are. And it gives a person a lot of trust. And also, so it's like if I can offer some guidance around purpose, and I've been telling them all these things about themselves, and they're likely to trust that guidance because I was right about all these other things. So in that sense, astrology, it can be very empowering to know that there's some sort of higher wisdom, in the universe, and what the astrology is one way that we see that intelligence.
Yeah, wow, thank you. That's a really good overview, by the way, Tracy, because I come from India and I'm aware of astrology. It's all over, the way marriages are matched or couples are matched to each other, when to start a business, when to ask for money. I mean, there's so much guidance around the astrological uses for what to do, but to me, it always felt a little unconscious, or like, oh, this is a good period to do a business transaction, and I think that there's the tactical element, which is really nice, but then there's also the philosophical or understanding your psyche, which I really like, or your natural reactions, your proclivity to certain behavioral dispositions. And I like what you said. It's also about finding what specific karma you're here to face. And it's that in itself, I think, is very empowering, because there are times when I've gone to astrologers in the past and they're like, ooh, you got a bad chart. You're going to be unhappy till you're 52 unless you do a ton of puja, a ton of spiritual, like going to temples and donating money and chanting. And to me, that's a very fear-based approach to looking at my karma, and I know that there's things that I have going well for me, and then there's certain things that I felt I was seeing repeated patterns in. And I would have really, when I went to those astrologers, I would have appreciated a more conscious kind of discussion around what is my karma, And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more on that. I don't have a specific question, but sort of what makes your approach different? Maybe it is because you bring in the intuitive and the coaching and the healing sides of it too.
Yeah, well, when a person comes for a reading, I do talk a little bit about kind of what I just talked about, some of the more philosophical aspects. But one thing I didn't mention is the relationship between, you could say, fate and free will, which is important, in terms of astrology. Because when we first come in as children, we don't really have free will. So the karma is operating 100%, you could say. So it's like you could look at, it isn't recommended that you look at a chart of a child actually until like after the age of 10 or so. And partly it is because it's like, it's said that the karma of the parents really are more an operation. But if you were to look at the chart of a child, because you can see a lot, that you would see that the chart is operating 100%, because the child doesn't have free will. We just don't have free will as children, because we are at the mercy of our parents or other authority figures, and we haven't really developed a strong sense of self, or our conscious mind, you could say, isn't that developed. It really doesn't start developing till around the age of 7 or so, somewhere between 7 and 10. So that's why it said after the age of 10 or so, then that's okay to start looking at a child's chart, because they're beginning to have a sense of self. And it's at that point when we develop a sense of self that we actually can start to exercise free will. And then hopefully, obviously, that free will grows. So in other words, as we become more aware and more awake, you could say, then we have more free will. And we can really measure our choices. We're not reacting to things all the time. So we're not living a life that's reaction-based. We're living a life that when we make choices, we really, consider them, and it's not coming just from an emotional reaction, you could say. So this is, some part of what I coach about is how to utilize one's free will. And because it is said that traditionally, the chart, you could say fate is 75%, and maybe we have 25% free will, but it really does vary from person to person, depending on their own personal evolution and how aware they are. So, and I think one of the great things about astrology is that it brings awareness through knowing your chart, being introduced to your chart, and knowing how more about your chart. Then you become more aware and you have more free will. You're more in charge of your life, and you're less governed by your emotional responses, by your habitual emotional mind, and you're more guided by your higher self, you could say, that part of you that's evolving, your spiritual, your soul, you could say. And so that's, one of my teachers said that awareness is 60% of everything. So if you have awareness about a certain issue in yourself, then that's 60% of what you need in order to overcome that issue, or to shed it, to let it go. So astrology is a great tool for that, to bring that awareness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'd say that's the main thing that I see with astrology, is really understanding oneself. It's an amazing tool for self-discovery, and really, because I think that's a large part of, being happy in life, is understanding who we are, and being okay with that, coming to terms with who we are and working with what we have. And rather than always grasping for something that is not who we are. It's just like being at peace with who we are, and astrology helps us, get to that point. And once we realize who we are, and what obstacles we are here to overcome, or what skills we're here to develop, or how it is that we might evolve in any area of our life, then we can utilize other tools such as yoga, or meditation, or hypnosis, or I'm a big believer in spending time in nature. Nature is very healing. That's a remedy that I give quite a bit. And it can be something simple, like going to walk in the park for 20 minutes a day, or half an hour, sitting up against a tree, sitting on the grass, connecting to nature. And obviously, now that we're entering into the warmer months, we go out and hike. Hiking is an excellent remedy, especially for Saturn transits. Saturn really, aligns with hiking, because when we hike, we only take what is essential with us. Maybe a little bit of food, some water. We have usually a backpack, and obviously if we're going for longer hikes, or we're going for several days, then we might have some additional things, but we're only going to take exactly what we need. And that's what Saturn's really teaching us, is about really only having what we need, and not, expanding out and being overly indulgent, which other planets can get us caught up in. So Saturn really, is about, he can be austere and he can be a little restricting, but it's all about teaching us about what's essential in life. And so hiking is good. It aligns us with that. And then addition, we're in nature, and scientists really don't know why nature's so healing. They just know it is. So it's like often there's one, I believe it's the Appalachian Mountain Club, but they have this saying, it's like, just get yourself into nature and nature will do the rest. So that's an excellent remedy, which is more modern, but and then, there's of course an endless list of other remedies, but I have certain ones that are my favorite. Yoga is a favorite of mine also. And of course, hypnosis is great, and I do that as well with long-term coaching clients. Hypnosis is another way to gain access to the subconscious mind, just like meditation. And I mean, there's many ways to gain access to the subconscious mind, but the difference with hypnosis is that you have somebody who's going to be guiding you once you're in, an altered state, and which in that altered state, the subconscious mind is open and receptive. And in the subconscious is where all our beliefs are. So if there's some belief that is hindering us in life, maybe a belief that we don't, like you were saying earlier, deserve to make a certain amount of money, until that belief is replaced with a different belief, we're going to come up against resistance. So that's hypnosis is good for that, because it basically is creating a new belief.
Interesting. So it's almost like brain surgery for your beliefs.
It is. It's like I always start with a coaching session around even determining what it is a person wants, because that's really important. The goal is as important as, like you said, creating the new belief. Until you know what it is that you're going for, I mean, obviously you can't even go to that next step. So the first step is establishing the goal and what that looks and feels like. And because our subconscious mind is all emotional, so it's really emotion driven, so it has to be felt, and not only seen but felt. So once that's established, then going to the next step of establishing the belief at the subconscious level, because trying to do it through cognition, through just the conscious mind will block it to a certain extent. It will take much longer.
Probably because it wants to keep you safe.
Exactly. That's totally the job of the conscious mind, or you could say the ego mind, is totally about survival. So if we're surviving, and which means that we have, food and shelter, which is, pretty much what that part of the mind is interested in. It's not interested in our spiritual evolution or our creative evolution. It's just about survival. So that's why when we try to step out of that zone, we'll experience resistance. But if the subconscious mind is brought into alignment with the conscious mind, and is made to realize that there's no risk, that it's not a risk to one's survival, that it's safe, then it will allow things to happen. It will get out of the way and it will get on board. And it's like one of the terms for what I do is like aligning the three selves. So
and the three selves are a higher self, or conscious mind and subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. So once everything's in alignment, then you're in a flow, and there's no resistance. So that is the ultimate goal. And those are some of the techniques that I use, and that are very powerful.
So Tracy, can you walk us through? So I work right now primarily on women looking to either find love or continue to cultivate their loving relationship. So with their significant other, like with a romantic partner. So I was wondering if you could kind of give us an example of someone that you worked with, because I know that aligning, so almost everyone I know has the goal of finding their partner, but then what kind of gets in the way? And can you share with us an example of someone who kind of overcame that through the work that you did with them? And if you have a case that includes astrology, that would be very enlightening.
Yeah, well, in terms of the astrology, if somebody, I mean, because often it's like what comes up in a chart when a person has some issues around relationship is there might be some what we call affliction or challenges to the seventh house of partnership or Venus in the chart. So it's like often Saturn is maybe in the seventh house or aspecting the seventh house or aspecting Venus. Because remember, like I said, Saturn has a restrictive quality and it takes longer for the person to mature and to trust, you could say. So it's really about trust and opening up the heart. Because obviously to create a connection with somebody, there has to be trust. And with Saturn aspecting Venus, there's often means that early in the childhood that the person didn't get the affection or admiration or love that would have been ideal. And it was totally meant to be because it's obviously in the chart. It just means that is one of the challenges in this life is for them to work on that particular part of themselves, which is opening up the heart chakra. So, and allowing themselves to make that connection. And so, it gets established in the childhood and then it's something that has to be worked on. And Saturn is a slow mover. So the person, usually it's after the age of 35 or so that a person, might be in some cases right after the Saturn return. So 31 or 32. In that range, they'll begin to notice a marked shift in their ability to let somebody in. Because before that, it's going to be really hard because Saturn's really, really strong before that. And he doesn't really fully mature to the age of 35. But life will get easier later in that particular case. So I see a lot of clients who have that particular aspect. And so, I do a lot of coaching around that. And often it's just a matter of timing. And, that they will, it's like a part of them just has to develop and mature to be ready. So sometimes it's just a matter of timing and they'll get there naturally. But certainly it's like if a person comes for a reading, it means that they're ready to do more. And they're maybe they sense it coming on and they just want to be as prepared as possible. So in that case, yes, I have worked with people, with using hypnosis for that. But I don't have any particular case that's coming to my mind right now. But in terms of the astrology, I do just, talking with people about that's something that, that's a particular, that they didn't get those needs met and that there are things that they can do. But it always starts with a Saturn-Venus connection or a Saturn seventh house connection, and sometimes a Saturn-Moon connection in the chart. It really starts with trusting oneself. So it really comes down to the self. So I say always to start there. So it's like, because it's like if you are having trouble trusting people or you're attracting people that are being abusive in some way, whether it's verbally or more, or who just simply don't treat you well, it has to do with yourself, which means that you're probably not being very good to yourself. And you're only aligning yourself with people that are affirming that subconscious belief, which is that you're not worthy of some healthy, beautiful relationship. So there's a tendency to attract relationships that aren't good on many levels. And so I always say to start with being good to oneself, and that can be just doing something once a day that's, self-nurturing, whether it's like, excuse me, I have my dog here.
Oh, let him meet your dog.
my little mini dachshund here
Oh, my
who needs a little
God,
attention.
so
Um,
cute. What's his name?
Her name is Belle.
Belle. Okay. Oh, so adorable. I didn't know you had a dog.
Oh, okay, yeah. And dogs are actually good for, they're very healing too. You know, they get us taking care of something and they definitely help to open up the heart.
Well, I
So
saw your face light up when she showed up. So
yeah, definitely. So so that's what I would say is starting with that. So and feeding people is always a great remedy. So feeding
that was
oneself is a,
very interesting. My mother-in-law is really into astrology, and she says that my karma shifted when I started feeding people. And she's
it's
been
extremely
feeding people
powerful.
all her life, and just from her heart, really. And the community that she's grown around her is amazing. So she's all about that. If you want to shift your karma, start feeding people. And I think the intention has to be very kind. It can't be like, I hope people like me or approve of me.
Yes, but one of my teachers said that if you don't, just start. You don't have to have the right intention
That's true.
necessarily.
That's true. When I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I started hosting meditation sits at my place and cooking. And I know I would watch myself through that period, like, do they like my food? Is there enough salt? And I would just have all this stuff going on
Mhm.
while people are eating. But that was for me a form of tapas, just kind of observing who I'm being while serving this food. But it did come from a place of genuine desire to share from my heart.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously that's great, but like I said, one of my teachers said even if your heart is pretty closed and you're not used to helping people, just do it anyway. It's like because it's like fake it till you make it, and you just start doing it. Eventually, the heart opens.
I love that. I want to repeat this. To help, number one remedy for opening your heart is starting to feed people. And it might be giving out, it might be paying for someone's meal, maybe paying for a person's coffee behind you, or handing out treats or something like that. And I know in India, on birthdays and wedding anniversaries and things like that, people go and serve food at a local um, children's center, or a slum school or something like that.
Yes, I mean, yeah, definitely helping people who don't have access to quality food or any food at all. That's definitely. I mean, another one of my teachers also said that um, just helping one needy person. It doesn't even have to be a group or organization. Just one person who's in need, and that will transform you. Just doing that. So yeah, and it's sometimes even helping that one person. If it is just one person, that can feel more. You feel more connected than maybe doing something for a group or an organization. I mean, it depends on the individual. Some people thrive in groups and organizations, and they prefer that setting and being helpful in that setting. But other people are more maybe the one-on-one is better. But you're right. That is feeding people is like the probably greatest remedy. That
Amazing. I'm glad you're saying that, because my mother-in-law has been saying it too. So it's just great to hear, two people who are knowledgeable in astrology to kind of confirm that.
hmm And I also agree that includes oneself, because if you're not, if we're not feeding ourselves well, obviously that's going to affect our emotions and how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about our body and everything. So it's like having at least one meal a day where we take care to
Yeah.
prepare a nice meal, and it doesn't, if it's just for us and we're just sitting at our table at home alone, that's fine. It's just
Mm.
making it nice, not rushing it, sitting down with a fully set table, maybe even candles. I mean, making
Wow.
it nice.
Like
Treat.
that book, Eat, Pray, Love, where she first starts with feeding herself, going to Italy and just kind of nourishing. It wasn't even that she was eating all healthy food. She just started eating to feel good and
Mhm.
loving herself through food. And then when she felt fulfilled, she kind of continued the journey of, getting connected to her spiritual side and then her loving side.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Um, I didn't read that book, but I've heard, I mean, obviously it's an amazing book and had a large impact. But so that sounds, yeah, she just intuitively, did that. And so that's, and then, and inversely, if you're living with somebody and maybe the relationship is going through a hard time, um, doing that for the other person, preparing meals for them and sitting down and really taking the time to connect over a meal. Because in this, modern society, we can get very, ordering in all the time or
Totally.
just,
That's something that my husband and I have incorporated. We're like, we're going to eat as many meals together. When I try to pack him like a fresh lunch every day because I'm like, and I always ask him, how is the food? For me, it's like, as long as we're both well fed, everything else will take care of itself. And it's our way of connecting with each other and feeling like we're supporting each other in a way. Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying
yeah,
that.
yeah, that I totally agree with that. And in general, beyond, I mean, that's the place to start, and then expanding out from there in terms of creating connection with somebody. Because if Saturn is involved with the seventh house or Venus or the seventh lord, the ruler of the seventh house, then there's a tendency over time for distance to develop in the relationship. Because Saturn, he's a cold, dense planet, and
Ooh,
coldness.
I'm wondering if you remember that from my chart. Do I have it?
I don't remember where your Saturn is off the top of my head.
Okay.
But yeah, that is a challenge.
Yeah.
Um, if that's the case, and so constantly coming up with ways to connect is going to be extremely important. And another great remedy that came down, through my teachings is taking a walk together at sunset and watching the sunset or watching the sunrise
Oh, so
together.
romantic.
It's very romantic, and it's deeply connecting. Because you're experiencing something that's so, you know, primal, and it's, life affirming together, and so it's connecting around that, around, something that's all about life, which is the sun, right? And so that is, it's like one of my teachers said, if you're having relationship issues, just get up in the morning and take a walk at sunrise, and you won't need relationship coaching or counseling. That will
Oh
solve your
my
problem.
God, that's gonna just totally transform my clients' lives. That's amazing.
Yep. So that is another way of doing things, and then of course just sharing in enjoying life. So connecting around dance or music, going dancing, listening to music, or even better yet, playing music together. If that happens to be in the people's lives, if they have that to connect with. But certainly everyone can dance, because it doesn't have to be formal dance. It can be just freestyle dancing.
Something that we tend to not do enough in our busy life here in the West. We don't incorporate regular dancing and singing, things like
Dancing and singing, yeah. And
that.
it's everybody can dance and sing. You don't need any training. You can do it, and that's deeply connecting for people to do, to recreate that connection. And then of course, with the challenge of computers and cell phones and things, it's putting those down for a certain amount of time of the day, and just really connecting that, without those things, because we can just get lost and
Wow,
mingle. And
that
I'm as
sounds
guilty as
revolutionary
anybody.
at this point. I was reading about the favorite show. It was in Wired magazine or something. The they did a poll on 20 somethings about what their favorite show is on Netflix, and by far the number one was Friends. You know, the show Friends.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the reasons was that they were looking at an era where people weren't on their cell phones all the time, and they were always connecting, and there was no technology as a barrier in their relationships and their life. So it's almost like we could just look back 10 years and have nostalgia to the kinds of connections people had before technology came around.
Yes, I mean, and actually, my daughter has watched that show, and she's like 17.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
And I think she does like long for something like that. And but the other day she was walking down the street reading a book, and a woman, you know, like in her 70s, stopped her and said, "I'm so happy to see you reading that book, you know, and not looking at your phone, looking at a phone." And she said, "You know, keep doing it." And so, I mean, it's just it's so unusual, you know, to be for a young person, you know, not to be hooked in that it was, and it's like this older generation, you know, they didn't have that. And so, and, you know, that was an interesting, you know, connection between two, you know, very different generations.
Different generations, yeah.
But so I think that's the main thing for keeping a relationship, you know, healthy and strong is that constant connection. Because I mean, it is natural for us to cyclically, you know, go into ourselves, and that's natural, you know, to withdraw from each other and we need our alone time, you know, we need, so that's natural, but not withdrawing so much that we lose the connection, you know, continuing to come back and keep connecting, because obviously we can't connect all the time either. I mean, that would be like, you know, too much. So it's finding that balance of having one's alone time, you know, having the autonomy, the healthy boundary, but also remembering to connect, you know, at times also.
Yeah. Oh, and I like how you said it. It's almost a ritualistic process to do that, especially if we're creating the habit to do so. And I like how you said, you know, it's a set, especially if Saturn's in your seventh house and you know that connection is something that is challenging for you. And probably it could be that for me too, actually, now that I think about it, which is probably why I'm a love and relationship coach, because I do have to work pretty hard at keeping my connections alive. It is work. It is part of my karma, my dharma.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't. I'll look at your chart later. Like, but if you feel that, then I'm sure it's there. And and personally, I have that connection in my chart too. I have a Saturn Venus connection, so it's like I'm speaking from total experience. I'm you know, not just astrological know-how. I've, you know, lived this, and so you know, I know what that feels like. And it's certainly something that I've been continually, you know, worked on and continue to work on, because it's a lifelong evolution. You know, it's not something that, you know, just is like a light switch. You know, it's an like, you know, like I said, an involvement. One gets better and better with that over time.
Yeah.
And it does tend to come, like I said, a little bit later, because Saturn is about that. It's about, you know, Saturn does represent older people, and
So
and
I
he.
just found my Saturn. It's up on the top left. I don't know if that's the sixth house or I don't think that is.
I somehow am remembering your Saturn being in the second house,
Like the top left, you know, the
right next to the first house, right next to Jupiter and Rahu, right?
yeah. Like up, right up and left of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Second house.
that's the second house, but it is the house of family, and so,
I see.
you know, it tends to delay the creation of one's family, and because that's what Saturn does, he delays, you know, and you know, it creates some issues in that area. But so that's something, you know, can be from the family of origin and also one's own family, that one creates.
I see.
Yeah, that it's not really. I think because your Venus is in the sixth house, as I remember, it's not aspecting Venus, but having Venus in the sixth house alone is a challenging place for Venus because the sixth house is a house of obstacles and conflict. So it's a tough place for Venus, but
and Venus is what?
Venus is the planet of relationships
Got it.
and love, ability to give and receive love, and also art and beauty, and basically Venus is in charge of all the five senses. It's like how our Venus is doing is our ability to connect with life through our senses, which includes love. So it is considered a hot spot for Venus, but it is a house, what we call a Upachaya house, which means it gets better over time. There's
like wine. Just kidding.
Why does it get better?
No, I said like wine.
Like wine, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so yeah, it's you could say it's a little bit better placement than maybe say the eighth house or something, which it won't get better over time. It just kind of is. It is the way it is, and it's harder to evolve. The sixth house being a Upachaya house, there's more there's that is possible. It opens up the door to that, and clearly your life exhibits that. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you're saying that, right? Like just having this awareness for me is really helpful, and I work with a healer and a coach who always makes me focus on my love life and my family, because she's like, look, you're smart, you'll make your way in your career, but these are the two areas that I need you to keep focusing on, and she's like, have you connected enough with your husband? She's just constantly on my case about it. And I'm grateful for her because I know how it's just in my chart, like you said, it's in my charts that these are challenges for me. And that's probably why I did get into love and relationship coaching, because I believe that a lot of women that I serve are probably challenged in the same ways. And hey, if I can overcome my challenges and still make my dreams happen, I believe that a lot of women can, and men for that matter.
Definitely. I was also thinking about your chart a little bit more too, and that the Venus is in Capricorn in your chart, and Capricorn is Saturn's sign. So that's why
I see.
It's very similar to having a Saturn-Venus connection when Venus is sitting in Saturn's sign. And then as I recall, you have K2 in the seventh house, and K2 is another planet that's he's not really interested in connection. He's more about detachment. Like Saturn, he has a similar, quality in a certain way to Saturn.
I totally have avoidant tendencies.
So yeah, with Rahu in the first and K2 in the seventh, there's a tendency to, life is a little bit more about oneself and the self-involvement rather than, with the relationship being the focus.
Totally. And I think that's where, my number one value is growth. And I think that gets in the way of connection. So it's really a constant practice to focus on my love life and connection with my friends, including you, because I know that that's where my fulfillment and happiness and sweetness in life comes from. But it's so easy to get drawn into my growth side, the side that's like seeking and to evolve and things like that. So Tracy, what I loved about my reading with you is that you really sat down and helped me understand each of the houses and the significance of the planets in each of them, because honestly, no one's ever done that for me. And I've looked for resources and books and online, and it's never made sense to me, So I really liked how you did that, and it is used, or it can be used as a self evolution tool, a self-awareness tool, not like oh, when's the right time to go make a sales call? I think that stuff is good, but I find the self-awareness piece even more helpful.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I could go on about your chart, but you've got a good handle on it, but that is true. It's like I have come across. There was somebody who was recently saying that if you want to, ruin a relationship, just focus on yourself all the time, and that'll bring it down. So it is a
like
delicate.
Shiva energy. Shiva energy is like all about consciousness, but the problem with that is it can be so self-absorbing.
Yep.
And then the feminine side, which is about connection. Oh, that's interesting that you're saying that we're talking about this, because part of the work that I do on myself and with my clients is balancing our masculine and feminine sides. And the masculine side, it's so easy to just focus on work and outwardly success and growth, self-evolution. And the feminine side is the more connection and playfulness and the ecstatic side, and the side that values family, that values celebration and intuition and things like that. So I think part of this journey is about aligning those two, marrying those two, having a marriage within. And it sounds like some support from an astrology perspective can even help that inner union.
Absolutely, because you can tell from a chart right away where if a person is more masculine or more feminine, and where they're, so obviously if they're a woman and it's predominantly a masculine chart, then that's going to create a lot of challenges in relationships, because they're going to be very outward. They're going to want to accomplish things in the world, and probably be the dominant one in the relationship to a certain extent. Maybe they don't want that. It just sort of happens naturally because it's just who they are.
Oh my God, I used to be called man eater. I mean, it was like I was a total. I was very dominating in my relationships, and it's something I have to really watch right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like you can see based on the dasha system, which is the planetary periods that a person is running, and that always. I mean, I don't know. Should I explain what that is? I don't know if.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to explain.
Well, basically,
is that the one that's so? There's the main chart, and then there's the one around like our life dashas. I'm just looking it up right now. Why don't you go ahead and explain it? Yeah.
Well, basically, the dasha system, the main one that is used is the Vimshotri dasha system. And when we're born, we enter into a certain planetary period or dasha, and that planet is going to give its karma at that time. It kind of releases its karma, and then we will finish out that planetary period, and we will go on to another one. And the planetary periods range from 6 years, which is the sun is the shortest, to Venus, which is 20 years, is the longest, and then there's different lengths in between there with the 9 planets. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because let's just say that somebody has Sun in Leo in the first house. Obviously, Leo is a masculine fire sign, and the Sun is a masculine planet. So, and if the first house is a fire house, so say that they're in a Sun period, and that Sun is giving its karma, that's going to be a time when they're extremely self-oriented, and it's about doing stuff in the world, and it's about self. It's a time of accomplishment and power and authority and extroverted action. But then maybe after that, they go into the moon period, which comes right afterwards, and maybe the moon is a feminine planet that's about connection and family and nurturing. And so then they go into that period, and depends where it's situated in the chart and what it's doing and whatnot. But that could suddenly they could switch out of that self-oriented, wanting power and authority and to make their mark in the world, to just wanting to connect and be, at home and with their families. So it's like a lot of the what's going on with us depends on what planetary period or what dasha we're running and how that planet is situated in the chart, and how it's releasing its karma and will affect how we're being in the world. So that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. That's right. So, Tracy, can you give a little bit of what is the scientific reason why astrology, Vedic astrology, is true? Like, is it because, and here's my understanding, and it's a very nerdy understanding, but we're born obviously with certain karma, and also we're also this mixture of elements, and at the time that we're born, the way the planets and the sun and the moon are aligned, that creates like a magnetic field almost with our own inner elements. So we are born on a very scientific level in that kind of, with the gravitational pulls happening, or the chemistry that's happening because of that. So I don't know, is that true, or did I kind of just made that up?
Probably the best explanation I've ever heard is that we were born from the stars. I mean, everything that's in our physiological makeup, you can find in the stars. The same elements, the same minerals, the same, we are no different. So it's like we are the same, basically. So obviously we know from the phases of the moon that the moon has an enormous pull on the earth. It affects the tides, it affects our moods. We notice stuff that goes on in the full moon, and obviously we're extremely affected by the sun. Different times of year, it changes the seasons. So the luminaries have a big effect on us, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, in every way we can think of. So we're all connected. It's like we are part of them, they are part of us. There really is no difference, and we're very much affected by everything that goes on with the planets because of that, because we're all interconnected. That's the best explanation I've ever heard in terms of on a scientific level. But obviously one can go kind of occult or metaphysical with it, and get into more the spiritual. If you look at like an atom, it has a nucleus, and then there's electrons that revolve around the nucleus. Well, that's very much like the solar system.
Yeah.
So we just see patterns everywhere, it's like that are the same on the micro level and on the macro level. So there's just this interconnectedness to everything at every level, and we're just a part of that. So we are going to be affected by what the planets are doing. That's probably as deep as I could go with it in terms of why they affect us. All I know is through the study and practice of astrology, I'm always, blown away over and over again, how it works. And it's like I look at a chart and I can, hone in on, a person's makeup, their psychological profile, their, like I said, their talents and skills, or see when a relationship is coming, or when a relationship just broke up, or so obviously being able to read the map of the chart, what is the chart? I'm not sure entirely why it works. But it does. It works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worked, and it's worked for over 5,000 years. And there was a reason why it was passed down through this lineage that kept it very sacred. And I'm curious, Tracy, why is it being shared with us today in today's world? And I know that you studied with the teacher. What is your responsibility as a wisdom keeper?
Well, Vedic astrology, as far as I know, started coming to this country in the 70s, 1970s. So it hasn't been over here that long. And since I've been doing it, which is like the past 10 years or so, um, there's been an explosion really. And it's like much more prevalent than it was even when I started. I mean, there's like tons of YouTube channels on Vedic astrology now, and more and more people. There's more and more Vedic astrologers. I mean, it's really in a growth period right now. So, I just think it's taken time for it to catch on, I guess you could say. And part of it is that the Vedic traditions in general have been growing in this country. I mean, yoga wasn't that as popular 20 years ago as it is now. I mean, now there's yoga studios everywhere, and yoga's part of the Vedic traditions.
Yeah.
Meditation, same thing. So Vedic astrology or Jyotish is part of that. And it may not be as popular as yoga and meditation, but it's becoming so. It's growing very, very fast. So and I think part of it is because of the growth of yoga and meditation, and it's part of that tradition, but also because it does offer, from what my clients have said, is it's a little maybe more accurate. It's certainly more prediction oriented, and a lot of people are interested in prediction, and it also has the spiritual component, which Western somehow, I think, somewhere along the line got it lost the spiritual connection. So that's something that Vedic astrology very much have. It's really steeped in the spiritual traditions of India. So I think that's another reason that it's growing so much, and people are getting, maybe choosing a Vedic reading maybe over a Western reading, or they like to get both because they like to get, different perspectives. So I guess that's my answer to the question. I don't really totally know the answer to the question, but that's just what I've noticed that's happening.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There is this explosion that's going on. And why is yoga so beneficial?
Well, yoga, yeah, I mean, it's one of the great remedies, and
are you just talking about the asanas, or do you mean like all pillars, all 8 pillars?
well, I'm mainly talking about the asanas.
Okay.
I do a lot of yoga, multiple times every week, and I mean, it's been amazing for me, very transformative. I've been doing it for almost 13 years, and basically, I mean, on a physiological level or spiritual level, it's opening up the chakras, and it's getting the energy moving, through the chakras or the meridians, and because we can get obviously very blocked, and it helps us to stay in the flow, so we don't get stuck in fear or and that we can handle change better. But also, it does include pranayama, which is breathing, which is so breath work is extremely powerful.
Yeah,
And
it's almost, I mean, I've heard from some, like my husband's grandfather, who's 80 something, very healthy, and he says that breath work is, he does an hour of yoga every day, but he says breath work is what helps him almost prevent disease, or if he's falling ill, then it's breath work that really serves him.
yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I think yoga is so great, is because if, ideally what's happening during the yoga practice is that you're doing the breathing too, that you're not being that what you're staying with the breath. So, because there is a tendency, obviously the mind can take over and we can start thinking, and then we usually stop breathing, or we're just breathing normally. We're not doing the pranayama, because ideally you're doing the pranayama for the entire practice, where you're doing the ujjayi breathing, and You're really conscious of your breathing. Your mind is focused on your breathing and the practice and the poses, and not drifting off to something else. But again, it takes practice, so that one keeps gently bringing the mind back to the breath. So ideally, you're doing the pranayama for the entire hour or hour and a half practice. But then there's also the specific pranayama exercises, which are, I'm sure you're aware of, like Nadi Shodhana or Kapalabhati.
Yeah,
Yeah.
breath of fire.
But yes, from my own experience and from the teachings, yes, you can overcome many illnesses with pranayama, including, and also, mental disturbances, depression. It's
What about
probably,
severe anxiety? And I'm wondering, how does anxiety relate to one's astrology chart? Have you seen specific astrology charts that show that a person has severe anxiety? Do you see a relationship?
oh, absolutely. Well, one thing that we look at right away for the mind is the moon, because the moon is the mind. It's the emotional, habitual mind. Mercury is the intellect, but the moon is our emotional self. And so for anxiety, which is obviously coming from our emotional self, you look at the moon. And if the moon is a Saturn and Mars, if the Saturn and Mars are aspecting the moon, that's a combination for anxiety and, being highly stressed.
And Mars are aspecting the moon.
Yeah, they're influencing the moon. You could say, are they, with the moon, like in the same house, or are they looking at the moon from another house there, but they're influencing it? Because Saturn, like I said, has a restrictive quality. So Saturn will maybe make the person withdraw from the world emotionally, and like, emotionally withdrawn. And Mars will make them, kind of maybe get angry with the world or be more outward. So they're very different energies. One is withdrawn and one is like, an outward expression through usually anger, or and so that combination can lead to anxiety, because they're very different energies that don't mix well together.
So is it because a person's just feeling so conflicted within that they start to feel anxious or a sense of disconnection?
Yeah.
Or is it literally just those two polar feelings that are pulling at each other?
Well, because Mars wants to act. Mars is the planet of action.
Yeah. And
Saturn,
that's where anxiety comes in, right? It's like this feeling of insecurity in this moment and a need to take action to feel safe, maybe?
Yeah, well, Mars isn't really known for insecurity. Mars is brave. Mars is a warrior god. He just wants to take action and he wants to conquer. That's what Mars is about. And obviously he has other higher attributes. I'm kind of giving him more, I guess, middle attribute of his nature, because obviously at his highest, he's conquering, our demons on the internal realms. He's interested in conquering inside and outside. It's not just worldly conquering. It could be conquering the internal. And Mars is what, a planet of discipline at its highest. He's the one that gets us doing yoga, running, hiking, doing anything. Mars is the planet. Every action we take is funneled through Mars. He is the planet of action, and he can also be a protector. Warriors protect, right? That's their job. So he has a lot of attributes, but he wants to take action. That's what he wants to do, whether it's on the internal realm or the external. That's his agenda. But Saturn doesn't. Saturn's the insecure one. Saturn's very cautious. And it's not that he won't act eventually. He just wants to take his time and make sure everything's safe and in place and well planned and organized. He's not impulsive like Mars. Mars is super impulsive. And so the two planets are working against each other. And that's what creates the anxiety, because the person, it's like they're paralyzed. And so they get anxiety ridden because they can't seem to take action, which is what the Mars wants to do. And then, they, because of, that Mars pulling it and the Saturn, if it was just Saturn, they might be more, they wouldn't feel anxiety, but then that leads to other complications. If it's just Saturn on the moon, then it can be a feeling of just emotional withdrawal and not connecting to the world. And but on the flip side, Saturn moon connections can be very, very good for solitude. And solitude, obviously, it can lead to deep spiritual practices. Because without solitude, we really can't connect to ourselves. So, that we need the solitude for connection, for the internal connection. So Saturn moon connections are great for solitude. The trick is to not let that solitude become isolation, self-isolation, because it can slip into that, if it becomes too much.
Sure.
So that's if it's just Saturn and moon by itself, but with the Mars, and that's when the anxiety comes in because the person needs to be taking action and they can't.
Yeah. And I see that a lot in people's love lives. They want things to work, either if they're single and they want to take action, get online, date. And if you're not online, then you're not taking action, but then there's a part that's resisting. Or if you're in a relationship and you're wondering when's the next step happening? When are we getting married? Like, when am I going to have, let's take steps, actions. And that is a very doer energy, which goes against the natural flow of the relationship.
Right. Yeah. It's not a surrender, letting it flow and evolve naturally. It's trying to control it.
Enchanting way.
Yeah. Well, that comes from a little bit the Saturn too, because Saturn, because of Saturn's, just remember, Saturn and Mars are, I guess you could say, they represent our reptilian mind, our security-oriented mind, our survival mind.
Saturn and Mars, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mars, it is the fighter response, and Saturn's the flight. Saturn will run and Mars will fight. And we're talking like at the most base. Saturn and Mars are deities. And they are planets of greatness. They challenge us like no other planets. And when we're having a Saturn or Mars transit, or where we're in a Saturn dasha, we're going to grow probably more than we're going to grow any other time in our life.
Right. So I think what you're saying is having reverence for these.
Having reverence, yeah. Rather than fearing them. Yeah. They're not planets to be feared. They're planets to be revered, and they are, part of us. And they are there to grow us. They're the planets. Saturn's considered the planet of greatness for that reason, because when we've undergone a Saturn transit, we've undergone a lot of difficulties, but we grow from that. When we're having maybe
it's like our hero's journey, even.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. So but having said that, yes, Saturn is interested in our survival, as is Mars. So Saturn, that's why Saturn likes to plan everything out and be in control, and is cautious because it wants to make sure that everything is safe. But that need to control can, obviously become problematic if it becomes overbearing, where we're trying to control every aspect of our life and we're just not going with the flow.
Yeah, or controlling everyone else.
Or controlling everyone else, and because if we're controlling a partner, it's because we're fearing that they're going to walk away, that they're going to abandon us. So therefore, we try to control every aspect of their lives. But that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because nobody can handle being controlled all the time. So eventually the person will leave if they're constantly under that feeling controlled. So this is definitely something, when Saturn's so strong in a chart, this is, that is something that I would definitely counsel somebody around, is if they have a really strong, prominent Saturn, that's something. Yeah.
Tracy, honestly, at this point, after listening to this whole interview and even doing our session together, it's almost like, how can you not have your chart read? I mean, if you're a person who's self-aware, who wants to grow in life, who wants to be a better person, be a better partner, or just take control. And I don't even mean take control from from a not letting go or surrender aspect, or but rather it's almost like having this kind of knowledge does allow you to surrender and let go, because you know what you're facing, and there's like a radical self-acceptance and self-compassion that can happen from that. Like when you read my chart for me, which you did, and I would say one of the most compassionate ways, Tracy, and it was so empowering too, is that I felt so much self-compassion for myself, and even love. Like I actually fell more in love with myself throughout my spiritual journey. Knowing all of these things helped me love like these parts of me, even the Saturn times, because I really honor and revere them. And I know that they also form a foundation for when I met my husband, and he was a part of my healing journey too. And I could share these aspects with him. And there was a humility that came from this knowledge. So, personally, I still want to thank you for that session that we had a while ago, and this invaluable knowledge that you've been sharing with us today, because it really, I love also the way it's almost, I see your face light up when you start talking about Saturn and Venus and Mars, and, the respect that you have for these forces and the knowledge that has been passed down, which I feel you've just been such a great wisdom keeper for this knowledge. It's so rare to find today. So I just wanted to express all of this. And you're married and you have a family and you've run your businesses. So it's like you've used astrology in your own life to align with your relationship, grow and shift and change and be a mother and grow, birth new business ideas and whatnot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, astrology has been, has helped me a lot in terms of my own, understanding my own karma, my own chart, who I am. And, everything I've said, I've done for myself. So absolutely, it's helped me tremendously in terms of being a better person.
Totally. So Tracy, can you tell us what's going on right now astrologically? And especially for us relationship-minded people, or people who just want to have a more fulfilling life, what should we know about the time that we're in right now?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, the big thing that's going on right now is Saturn and Mars are both in Scorpio in the sidereal zodiac, which is what Vedic astrology uses. It's different than Western astrology, which uses the tropical zodiac. So there's a difference of 23 degrees between the two zodiacs. So some people might not be familiar with that. But, so they're together. And I remember I was mentioning they're not really planets that they're very different. So when you have Saturn and Mars together, obviously that's going to create a lot of, intense energy, because Mars wants to take action and Saturn, wants to hold back. And so there's we call it the accelerator and the brake.
Oh my God, I've been feeling so tired lately. How long has this been? How have we been in this?
Mars Saturn's been in Scorpio for quite some time, since I believe it's November 2014. And we'll be there, for a little bit longer. But Mars just went into Scorpio, let's see, where are we now? Back in February. So this kind of a new phenomena, just for the past couple of months they've been together. Mars rules Scorpio. That's one of his signs. So Mars is the stronger planet. Saturn's, obviously not comfortable in the sign of Scorpio because it is Mars's sign. And on the positive side, I see this as a time when we can make breakthroughs because Mars is the stronger planet. So Saturn might, want to keep us in my area, but Mars will allow us to break out of that because he's so strong right now, and wherever Saturn might be keeping us stuck because of fear, because Saturn does represent fear. Mars is, courage, and so this is an opportunity to have courage and to make a move and break out of
like
something we've been stuck in.
burn through some of our karma.
Yep.
And how long is this period?
Mars will be in Scorpio until September, like mid-September or so.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of time, and that right now they're both retrograde, which means it looks like they're moving backwards in the sky. Time when they're even more intense. The energies are even more intense when they're retrograde. They're like even more powerful. It's considered a strength in Vedic astrology when planets are retrograde, but sometimes it can bring issues too. So with both of them retrograde, this energy is even more intense. It's like becoming more internalized, and they're moving together. So they're getting closer together, and they are going to form a conjunction. And so things are going to kind of heat up for the next couple of months while they're moving closer together.
Whew, I can already feel it. We're simmering right now, and it's going to be summertime. It's going to be a very simmering few months.
I mean, it depends what house it's happening, in your chart, because that's the house that is going to be getting a lot of activity. It varies from person to person how that's going to work out. Maybe if it's.
Do you have like a mantra recommendation? Like
a mantra recommendation?
Yeah.
For during this period? Well, certainly, I think, and it's always good to chant Om Namah Shivaya to Shiva. Yeah. Or Shiva.
What about Ganpati?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yep. So
for that Om Namah or Om Ganpati Namaha. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think chanting to Shiva is always a good thing to do.
Yeah, people say that all the seed, or one teacher told me that all the seed sounds are in Om Namah Shivaya, and it's a very includes like a very comprehensive mantra.
It is, and Saturn or Shani actually is his Sanskrit name. Shani is aligned with Shiva, so you are aligning yourselves with the more positive aspects of Shani or Saturn when you chant to Shiva. So I'd say that is excellent.
So chant Om Namah Shivaya 108 times every morning.
That would be good during this time, during this conjunction of Saturn and Mars. That would be good. What?
And feed people.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And what if you were single and dating? What's your advice? And I know you said it depends on each person's chart, but in general, what about this period of finding love? Like, do you have any general feedback on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with the Saturn and Mars. I mean, it'll change as the months unravel, because it depends where like Venus is, because Venus is really, the relationship planet archetypally. And, Venus is, coming up to Aries now. Venus has been in Pisces for a little bit of time, but Venus is pretty fast moving, about 6 weeks or so, maybe 5-6 weeks. So, it always depends on that. And right now we are going into an Aries period because the sun is in Aries, and there's a new moon that's about to happen in Aries. And so this is like Aries is always is a little bit less about relationships and more about maybe birthing something in your life. Because Aries is about birth. It's about new beginnings. And it's a creative sign. It's very creative, as birthing something is a creative act.
Yeah.
So it's really about that right now. I mean, I suppose it could be birthing a relationship,
Yeah. Birthing a new possibility, birthing a new
Yeah.
reality.
Or a new way of being,
Yeah.
maybe that too. So it's particularly strong because Aries is a sign that Mars rules, and Mars is very strong right now, as I told you, because he's in Scorpio. So that makes this Aries period even more powerful because Mars is so powerful.
Interesting.
And yeah, so it's a very fiery, action-oriented, creative time right now.
So I was reading, this may have nothing to do with it, but I was watching Doreen Virtue's weekly, forecast, and she said, right now, the first part of the week is about detox, and then the second part is about taking action. So it sounds like those two have to go in conjunction together.
Yeah, like maybe when she means detox, because Pisces is a sign that comes right before Aries, and Pisces is about letting go of something.
Yeah.
Because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and it's a water sign, and it's really, the symbol is, two fish swimming in opposite directions is really representative of the ocean, where where we let go of everything. We did total, dissolution of self, whereas Aries is like the moment we're born, so it's the creation of self. And so they're completely different, but in order to birth something, you usually have to let go of something. So that's why Pisces, so maybe that's what she's talking about, detoxing, letting go of something, whether that's letting go of an addiction.
Yeah.
Or,
she was even talking about sugar,
yeah.
caffeine, alcohol, just something that on a physical level even, or emotional.
Could be physical. Yeah, where you're letting go of something that's not good for you, and you're going to start a new, regimen with the Aries energy. That's coming in because Venus is, changing. I mean, the sun's been there for a little while, but now Venus is entering the picture. Mercury's in Aries. I mean, so it's like there's a lot of Aries energy, and it's like we all know that in order to have something new, in order to birth something new, we have to let go of something.
Yeah. Wow, Tracy, I just feel so replenished and kind of excited because I think I have a new understanding of astrology, one that I can actually, when people talk about Mercury retrograde or Saturn retrograde, I had zero clue what they were talking about, and everyone makes it sound like this really big deal, and it's why everything's falling apart. But I think that you help give a really insightful and practical perspective on it, and really useful for anyone who's listening. So thank you so much. And I know that you have an offering for the audience. So what would you like to offer?
Sure. People can go to the homepage of my website and just put in their email, and they'll get a PDF with 7 powerful ancient Vedic remedies for healing oneself and also healing relationships. So it's all right there. Some of it I touched upon, but it's all, there's links to resources and things like that. So
that's great. And I will share that too. But in case people are listening, it's www.tracyatkinson consult.
SON.
Sorry, did I say CON? Okay, Tracy, so TracyAtkinson consulting.com. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you, Sarah. This was a joy. Thank you.
I'm going to hit stop broadcast.